With Dragon Ball FighterZ quickly approaching, we expect a lot of new players to begin their debut in competitive fighting games. For some brand new to fighters, some of the terminology used by the community can seem confusing and intimidating, but it's really not. We will go over some examples from other fighting games to give you a quick rundown of some of the words and phrases you will likely be coming across during your grind. Let's get right into it. Normal moves are usually performed with a single button on your controller. If you're playing Dragon Ball with an arcade stick, it will likely be one of these 4 buttons, or these 4 depending on your layout. With a pad, it will likely be the 4 face buttons here. Normals can be done standing, crouching, or in the air to give different variations of the normal. In Dragon Ball, there are only 3 buttons for normals: light, medium, and heavy. Some other fighters, like Street Fighter here, will have different normals depending on whether you want to perform a punch or a kick, but that is not the case in Dragon Ball. These are special moves, not to be confused with normals. Special moves will usually be unique to certain characters, and these are done by performing a motion on your stick or D-pad alongside the press of a button. An example of this in Dragon Ball would be Gohan's Masenko or Android 18 calling in 17. All of these characters are performing different moves, but they are all performed with the same inputs. If you were to ask someone how to perform these moves, you'd likely get a response such as it's just a fireball motion, or maybe they would call it a quarter circle, or even a 2-3-6 input. Using the classic Hadouken as an example, we're going to explain some of these terms players use to notate different inputs. Whether you use a fight stick or a controller to perform a fireball, or most beams in Dragon Ball FighterZ, you simply do a quarter circle with your stick or D-pad. The motion would be to press down, then diagonal down forward, and then finally forward. So what is 2-3-6? If you remember, I used that as an example as well. Well, put simply, if you look at the number pad on your keyboard, it's simply each number represents a direction. So 2 would be down, 3 would be down right, so down forward in this case, and 6 would be right or forward. To perform the fireball, you press 2, 3, 6 and a punch button. Numbers notating a direction is used for more than just fireballs. You might see it for an instant air dash like this, where it's 9, 5, 6, 9 being upright, 5 being neutral, 6 being right. So just remember, if you ever see a bunch of numbers in a row like that, it's just the direction that you need to put your stick for an input. We won't spend too much time on this because it's a pretty simple concept. A bread and butter, or BnB, is essentially a reliable combo that can be performed wherever you land a hit. Sometimes combos might be situational. For example, a combo may only work in the corner, maybe you'll need 4 bars to perform it. Situational combos like that are usually more advanced and require certain circumstances to be met, whereas a bread and butter combo is a combo that you can rely on to work no matter what the situation is. Bread and butters are usually very cookie cutter, but they are essential to learn when picking up a new character because you'll be using them a lot. Frame data is a bit of an intimidating subject, as it always appears to be much more complicated than it really is. I could do a full video on frame data if you guys want, as the details could take a lot of time to explain. However, here's a very basic, dumbed down example. So Dragon Ball FighterZ runs at 60 frames per second. This means that every 1 second that passes in real life, 60 frames have passed in the game. So let's say that Kid Buu's level 3 super takes 30 frames to start up. This means that for half a second, Kid Buu will be stuck in an animation as he begins the startup frames of his super. Here we'll use an example of Cell to show just what startup frames are, active frames, and recovery, which are 3 of the most important. So here are the startup frames to Cell's Kamehameha. What startup frames are essentially the wind up to the move. Cell is not really threatening yet, he is just preparing a Kamehameha. He is pretty much has to stay still until it comes out, until the active frames come out. So here are the active frames right about now. The Kamehameha is now out. There's a hitbox that can hurt the opponent. The opponent must respect the Kamehameha at this point. And here are the recovery frames. Cell is done his move, but he cannot move yet. He still has to go back to his neutral stance before he could start up his next action. Hope you guys have a rough idea about what frame data can really show you. If you want a more detailed video about some of the more important aspects of frame data, like what it means to be positive or negative on hit, on block, let me know, because it's a topic with a lot of depth and I think it kind of needs its own video. A block string is a very simple concept. Just as it sounds, it's a string of moves that forces your opponent to block. Without getting too deep into frame data, every single move in the game will put your opponent into block stun by a certain amount of frames. If they're stuck in block stun for long enough that your next move can come out before they leave block stun, it's a true block string, meaning your opponent has zero chance to press any buttons. A big part of fighting games is defense, so by contrast, in order to win, you're gonna have to break the opponent's defense. By mixing in block strings with frame traps and grabs and just overhead mix-ups, your end goal will be to open up your opponent's defense so you can start getting your combos going. As I've said before, I'll be dedicating an entire video to frame data alone. In that video, we'll be going over numbers to see what's an actual block string, what's a frame trap. We're going to see the differences and how you could kind of come up with these on your own. So yeah, that's about it for block strength. It's a very simple concept, but it's an important one to know. We'll talk about frame traps next, since it's something I mentioned in this video and you might not be familiar with it. To perform frame traps, you kind of need a decent understanding of the frame data of your character. So like I said, if I ever make a video on frame data alone, I'll go more into this because there's a lot of depth. But what it essentially is that you're performing a block string, but you're actually leaving a gap where your opponent can press a button. So it's not a true block string. They can press a button, but through the magic of knowing your frame data, you ensure that the next button you press will always beat theirs. So here's an example using just made up numbers. Let's say as Go Tanks I jab you and it leaves me +3 on block. This means that if you block my jab, I can move 3 frames before you. So next, I do a move that has a 4-frame startup. So that means it's not a true block string, as I only was +3, but my next move is taking 4 frames to come out, which means there's 1 frame where you're allowed to do something and stop blocking. But because there's no move in the game that starts in 1 frame, my next move would always counter hit you because there's nothing that you could have pressed to interrupt me fast enough. Like I said, this takes a lot of knowledge of frame data. I can make a video once the game drops, once we get actual numbers, and I could show you of me playing the game and setting up counter hits. So yeah, let me know if you'd like to see that in the future. DHC, or Delayed Hyper Combo, is a term that stems from the Marvel vs. Capcom series. It refers to a mechanic that allows you to tag in a character on your team who will immediately begin their hyper combo, or in the case of Dragon Ball, their super. This mechanic allows for team-specific combos, or can also be used just to safely bring in a new character by having them cover themselves with their own super. Unlike in Marvel 3, a character in Dragon Ball can be tagged in and immediately perform their super without the point character having to super first. This is most certainly a mechanic you will grow used to, as there have been many clips in the most recent beta showing how valuable this mechanic can be.